The most feared man in New York froze the moment he heard laughter echo through his mansion. Not because laughter was rare, but because it was her laughter. And she hadn't made a sound in 18 months. Adrian Volkov stood motionless at the foot of the staircase, rain still clinging to his black overcoat, the smell of gunpowder faint on his cuffs. His empire controlled half the eastern seaboard. Politicians answered his calls, rivals disappeared when he blinked. But inside this mansion, he was powerless, because upstairs, behind the carved oak doors at the end of the hall, his 6-year-old daughter hadn't spoken since the night masked men tried to drag her into a van outside her ballet studio. She watched her nanny get shot. She watched her father shoot back. She watched blood-stained snow. And since that night, silence. Doctors from Switzerland, trauma specialists from Boston, private neurologists, experimental therapy programs, $4.8 million. Not one word. Until tonight, Adrian slowly removed his gloves. The laughter came again, soft, uncertain, like it didn't know if it was allowed to exist. His heart began to pound. He moved toward the sound, each step heavier than the last. The door to his daughter's room was slightly open. Inside, a woman in a pale cleaning uniform sat cross-legged on the floor. Bright yellow rubber gloves resting beside her. And his daughter was smiling. If this story pulls you in already, make sure you subscribe. Because sometimes the greatest miracles don't come from power. They come from understanding. Adrian pushed the door open fully. And everything changed. Adrian didn't step inside immediately. He watched. The woman on the floor hadn't noticed him yet. She was humming, softly, almost absent-mindedly. Not a lullaby. Not something cheerful. It was steady, calm. His daughter, Mila, sat across from her with a box of wooden blocks. The blocks had been untouched for months. Therapists had tried to force engagement. Tried reward systems. Tried structured play. Mila would stare through them like they weren't real. But now, she was stacking them. Crooked, careful, focused. The housekeeper knocked one block over dramatically. "Oh no," she whispered with mock seriousness. The tower collapsed. "That's embarrassing." Mila's lips twitched. Not a full laugh, but the beginning of one. Adrian felt something inside his chest crack open. He stepped forward. The floorboard creaked. The housekeeper looked up instantly. She froze, stood slowly, lowered her eyes. Rule 1 in this house. Staff do not hold eye contact with Adrian Volkov. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quietly. "I didn't realize you were home." Her voice was steady. No shaking. No panic. Strange. Most people trembled around him. "What is your name?" Adrian asked. "Elena Marquez." She didn't add, "sir," this time. Interesting. Mila suddenly grabbed the woman's sleeve. Tightly. Adrian's breath caught. His daughter hadn't voluntarily touched anyone since the attack. Not him. Not doctors. No one. Elena gently placed her yellow gloves aside and sat back down. "I was just cleaning the hallway," she explained calmly. She was sitting outside the door. "I sat on the floor so I wouldn't feel taller than her." Adrian studied her. No perfume. No makeup. Dark hair tied low at the nape of her neck. Small scar near her temple. Not delicate. Not refined. But grounded. "How long has this been happening?" he asked. Elena hesitated. 3 days. 3 days. 3 days his daughter had been slowly opening up. And no one told him. That meant someone had seen. Which meant someone had allowed it. Or hidden it. And in Adrian's world, nothing happened by accident. Mila stacked another block. Then looked up at Elena. And whispered. Again. The word was fragile. But real. Adrian's heart stopped. 18 months of silence. And the first word wasn't, "Papa." It wasn't, "Help." It wasn't even a cry. It was, again. Elena knocked the blocks over. Mila smiled. And Adrian knew something had just shifted in his empire. Not in the streets. Not in his businesses. But here. Inside these walls. And whoever tried to interfere with that shift would regret it. That night, Adrian didn't sleep. He stood alone in his private study, the city lights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling glass behind him. His men were handling shipments. Accounts were moving. Territory negotiations continued. But his mind was upstairs. On the floor, With wooden blocks. Elena Marquez, he muttered. He pressed a button on his desk. Dimitri, I want everything on her. By morning. He ended the call. Because miracles didn't just happen in Adrian Volkov's world. They were engineered. Or they were threats. Upstairs. Elena sat beside Mila's bed. The little girl had fallen asleep with her fingers still wrapped around the edge of Elena's sleeve. Elena didn't move, didn't pull away. She knew that grip, the silent desperation behind it. Because she used to hold on to her mother the same way. Before the night the wrong men came to their door. Before the shouting. Before the gunshot through the kitchen wall. Before she learned that silence was safer than speaking. Elena gently brushed Mila's hair back. You don't have to talk, she whispered. I know that kind of quiet. A soft knock hit the doorframe. Adrian. He didn't step inside this time. Why you? He asked bluntly. Elena didn't stand. She doesn't trust loud people, she said. That's not an answer. Elena finally looked at him. Not boldly. Not challengingly. Just directly. I didn't try to fix her. Adrian's jaw tightened. Everyone tries to fix her. Elena shook her head. She doesn't need fixing. She needs control. Silence filled the room. Adrian stepped inside slowly. Control? He repeated. When something terrible happens, Elena said quietly, children lose control. Over their body. Over their voice. Over what happens next. The more adults push, the more they retreat. Mila shifted in her sleep. Still holding Elena. So what are you doing? Adrian asked. I let her decide when things fall. Adrian frowned. The blocks, Elena clarified. I don't knock them over unless she tells me to. She gets to choose when something breaks. Something about that sentence hit him harder than any bullet ever had. Because he remembered that night. Snow falling. Gunfire exploding. His daughter screaming. And him. Pulling her behind him. Forcing her down. Forcing silence. Forcing safety. Control ripped from her hands. You're not trained, Adrian said finally. No. You have no child psychology degree. No. You're just a cleaner. Elena nodded once. Yes. The word didn't carry shame. It carried fact. Adrian studied her. No ambition in her eyes. No calculation. No fear. Just quiet strength. You'll move to the second floor, he said abruptly. Elena stiffened. That won't be necessary. It wasn't a request. He stepped closer. And from now on, you answer only to me. There it was. A shift. Power being restructured inside the house. And somewhere down the hallway. A door closed softly. Someone had been listening. Veronica Hale had managed Adrian Volkov's estate for 6 years. 6 years of precision. 6 years of loyalty. 6 years of positioning herself exactly where she needed to be. And now, a cleaner with yellow gloves was undoing it in less than a week. Veronica stood at the end of the hallway, just beyond the curve of the marble archway, watching Adrian walk out of Mila's room. She saw the shift in his posture. The softness in his jaw. The hesitation. Adrian Volkov did not hesitate. Not in business. Not in war. Not in life. And certainly not over staff. Yet tonight, he had. Veronica waited until he disappeared into his study before stepping forward. She entered Mila's room without knocking. Elena was still seated on the floor. Mila asleep beside her. You're overstepping, Veronica said quietly. Elena didn't look up. I was asked to move upstairs. By him. Yes. Veronica's lips tightened. You should understand your place. Elena finally stood, carefully removing Mila's small hand from her sleeve and placing it gently onto the blanket. My place, Elena replied evenly, is wherever she feels safe. The air shifted. Veronica stepped closer. You think you're special because she spoke? I don't think that at all. Men like Adrian, Veronica continued, don't reward loyalty. They reward usefulness. Elena met her gaze. Then I suppose I'm useful. Veronica smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yes. For now. The next morning, Dimitri placed a file on Adrian's desk. Background check, he said. Adrian opened it. Elena Marquez. Age 28. No criminal record. Former community college student. Dropped out 3 years ago. Mother deceased. Father unknown. Employment history. Janitorial. Night shifts. Temporary cleaning contracts. But one detail made Adrian pause. Hospital record. Admitted at age 12. Gunshot wound to left shoulder. Crossfire incident. No charges filed. Adrian leaned back slowly. She wasn't just someone who understood silence. She had survived it. Anything else? He asked. Dimitri hesitated. There's something odd. Adrian's eyes lifted. She applied for work here 3 months ago. Twice. Was denied both times. Then suddenly, approved. Approved. Adrian didn't approve cleaning staff. Veronica did. Who pushed it through? Adrian asked. Dimitri swallowed. Veronica. Interesting. Very interesting. That evening, Mila didn't come out of her room. Elena knocked softly. No answer. She entered. The blocks were scattered, but Mila sat in the corner. Back in the position Elena first found her. Curled. Silent. Retreated. Elena, she whispered gently, kneeling down. Mila didn't move, and then, Elena saw it. The wooden blocks, every single one of them, had been snapped in half. Deliberately broken. Mila's eyes were empty again. And across the room, on the dresser, sat a single yellow rubber glove. Torn down the middle. Elena felt her stomach drop. Someone had done this, and they wanted her to see it. The question wasn't who. The question was why now. Behind the closed door, footsteps faded quietly down the hall. Elena. Adrian's voice was controlled. Too controlled. She stood in the center of his study, hands still damp from washing paint off Mila's fingers. He didn't ask her to sit. He didn't offer her water. He just watched her. Explain, he said. Elena's pulse quickened. Mila's blocks were destroyed. Adrian continued. Security shows you were the last one in her room before she locked herself inside. Elena stared at him. I didn't break them. Veronica says she found you yelling. Elena's eyes flickered. I wasn't yelling. She says you were frustrated. That you grabbed one. That's not true. Adrian stepped closer. The air between them tightened. You understand what this looks like? Yes. And I didn't do it. No tears. No begging. Just certainty. Adrian hated that. Because certainty without proof in his world meant weakness. I moved you upstairs, he said quietly. I gave you access no one else has. I didn't ask for that. You benefited from it. I benefited because your daughter needed someone who wasn't afraid of her silence. That hit harder than expected. Adrian's jaw flexed. And now she's silent again. Elena swallowed. Yes. Because of what? Because someone wanted to take control away from her again. The words hung in the air. Adrian's eyes darkened. You're accusing someone? I'm stating a pattern. Silence. Then, a knock. Veronica stepped in, composed as always. I didn't mean to interrupt, she said softly. But Mila is refusing dinner. Adrian's attention snapped toward the hallway. Elena moved instinctively to follow. Veronica blocked her path. Perhaps, Veronica said gently, it would be better if she didn't see you tonight. Elena froze. Adrian looked between them. This was the moment. Trust one, or trust the other. He studied Veronica. Impeccable record. Years of loyalty. Then he looked at Elena. A woman who didn't flinch under pressure. A woman whose first instinct was to kneel on the floor instead of stand over a child. Let her through, Adrian said. Veronica's expression cracked, just for a second. Elena walked past her without a word. Inside Mila's room, the air felt heavy. The little girl sat exactly where she had the night of the attack. Hands over ears, eyes distant. Elena didn't approach immediately. She sat down quietly near the doorway. Didn't speak. Didn't touch her. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then, Elena gently picked up the torn yellow glove from her pocket. She held it up. I guess we both lost something today, she said softly. Mila's eyes shifted. Just slightly. Elena placed the glove on the floor. And we can decide when it gets fixed. A pause. Then Mila's small hand moved. Not toward the glove. Toward Elena. Veronica watched from the doorway. Her nails digging into her palm. This wasn't supposed to happen. The fracture was supposed to widen. Instead, the bond tightened. And that made her next move inevitable. 3 boroughs away, in a dim warehouse overlooking the Hudson, Viktor Sokolov lit a cigar and smiled at the photo on the table. Adrian Volkov, his daughter, and a woman in yellow gloves. Interesting, Viktor murmured. Viktor didn't rush revenge. He cultivated it. 2 years ago, Adrian had destroyed one of Victor's shipping routes and forced him out of Manhattan. The kidnapping attempt at the ballet studio had been a warning. Not meant to escalate, just meant to send a message. But Adrian responded with blood. So Victor adapted. He waited, watched, learned. And now, Adrian had grown soft. Soft men were predictable, and predictable men were easy to break. Back at the mansion, Adrian stood in the security room. Roll it back, he ordered. Dimitri replayed footage from the hallway outside Mila's room. 3:12 p.m., Veronica enters. 3:18 p.m., Veronica exits. 3:22 p.m., Elena enters. 3:47 p.m., Mila locks door. Adrian leaned forward. Zoom in on 3:12. The image sharpened. Veronica's hand was behind her back as she entered. When she exited, it wasn't. Freeze that, Adrian said. There. For half a second, something small dropped from Veronica's sleeve as she adjusted her cuff. A blade. Thin. Metallic. Sharp enough to slice rubber. Adrian's blood ran cold, not because of the sabotage, but because of the calculation. She didn't just want Elena gone. She wanted Mila destabilized. She wanted Adrian emotionally reactive, unstable, manipulated, which meant she believed she could control the outcome. Adrian turned slowly. Bring her to me. Meanwhile, Elena sat beside Mila's bed, quietly threading needle through yellow rubber. She wasn't fixing it perfectly. On purpose, she left the scar visible. When Mila looked up, Elena smiled faintly. Some things don't go back to how they were, she said softly. But they can still work. Mila touched the stitched line. Then whispered, scar. Elena's throat tightened. Yes, she replied gently. Scar. Another word. Small. But real. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Heavy. Fast. Not calm. Adrian stormed into the room. Not alone. Veronica was behind him. Her posture still straight. Her expression still composed. Elena, Adrian said sharply, step outside. Elena's stomach dropped. Mila's fingers gripped her sleeve. No, the child whispered. The word was clear, strong, and directed at her father. Adrian froze. His daughter had just contradicted him. Publicly, Elena slowly stood. It's okay, she whispered to Mila. But Mila shook her head violently. No. Adrian's eyes flicked to Veronica. Just for a moment, and Veronica understood. The balance had shifted, permanently, because this wasn't about a glove anymore. It was about loyalty, about control, about who the child chose. And in Adrian Volkov's world, choice meant power. Leave us, Adrian said quietly. Dimitri stepped back. The guards exited. Only Adrian and Veronica remained in the study. The door shut with a soft click. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian walked around his desk. Slow, measured. Would you like to explain, he asked calmly, why you were carrying a blade into my daughter's room? Veronica didn't flinch. I wasn't. Adrian pressed a button. The screen behind him lit up. Footage froze at the exact frame. The blade slipping from her sleeve. Silence filled the room. Veronica's composure held. Barely. It was a letter opener, she said smoothly. You brought a letter opener into a 6-year-old's bedroom? She hesitated. Just a fraction too long. That girl is manipulating you, Veronica said, abandoning subtlety. You don't see it because you're desperate. Adrian's eyes darkened. Careful. She wants security, position, protection. You think it's coincidence she understood your daughter? You think it's fate she appeared right when you needed saving? Adrian stepped closer. Finish that thought. Veronica's voice lowered. You built an empire on suspicion. On strategy. And now you're letting emotion blind you. And you built your place here on proximity, Adrian replied coldly. Not loyalty. The tension snapped. You were nothing before this house, Veronica hissed. I built everything inside these walls. I kept people loyal. I protected your interests when you were too consumed with grief to see clearly. And so you punish a child? Her silence answered him. Adrian exhaled slowly. You framed her. Veronica didn't deny it this time. She was destabilizing you. No, Adrian said quietly. She was stabilizing Mila. That was the real offense. Veronica's voice dropped. You're changing. Adrian stared at her. Yes. That was what terrified her. Not Elena, not Mila. Change. Because a man who chooses family over fear is no longer predictable, and unpredictability is dangerous. Adrian stepped back toward his desk. You're done here. Veronica's eyes widened. You can't remove me. I already have. He pressed another button. 2 guards entered. You leave with nothing, Adrian said. No access. No severance. No references. Veronica's mask finally cracked. You think she's safe? She whispered. Adrian didn't respond. You think this house isn't being watched? The room went still. What do you mean? Adrian asked softly. Veronica smiled faintly. You were always good at eliminating enemies in front of you. She leaned closer. But you missed the ones behind you. Adrian's pulse slowed. That wasn't the tone of someone bluffing. You're not working alone, he said. Veronica didn't answer, but she didn't deny it. The guards pulled her back. As she reached the door, she said one final sentence. You should check your East Dock shipments. The door shut. Adrian stood alone, silent. Then, his phone vibrated. Dimitri, boss, we have a problem. Adrian didn't blink. What? East Dock. 2 containers missing. Adrian's eyes shifted toward Mila's hallway. Toward Alina's room. Toward the fragile piece he had just begun rebuilding. This wasn't sabotage inside the house. This was infiltration. Calculated. Coordinated. And if Veronica had been the internal distraction, then someone else had been positioning externally. And that meant the war never ended. It just went quiet. Run it again. Adrian stood in the surveillance room, watching grainy footage from 2 years ago. Snow. Flashing lights. The ballet studio. Mila's small pink shoes near the curb. He had watched this footage hundreds of times. But grief makes you see only what you're ready to see. Tonight, he was ready to see more. Soon left, he said quietly. Dimitri adjusted the frame. There, a black SUV parked half a block away. Engine running. License plate obscured by snow. That vehicle wasn't in the original police report, Adrian murmured. No, Dimitri confirmed. Because it left before first response arrived. Adrian's jaw tightened. The attack had been framed as random retaliation from Viktor Sokolov. But Viktor preferred spectacle, public dominance, not subtle misdirection. The masked men at the ballet studio were loud. Messy. But that SUV. That was coordination. Cross-reference that vehicle with East Dock manifests, Adrian ordered. Dimitri froze. Sir, are you suggesting? I don't suggest, Adrian said calmly. I conclude. If the East Dock shipments were compromised now, and that SUV connected back then the attack on Mila hadn't just been revenge. It had been leverage. Someone wanted Adrian destabilized, emotionally, strategically, financially. And they'd been patient. Very patient. Upstairs, Elena sat on the floor with Mila again. This time with paper, crayons scattered. Draw what you remember, Elena said softly. Not forcing, just offering. Mila hesitated, then began. Black lines. A rectangle. 2 circles. Elena watched carefully. A car. But not the van. Different shape. Bigger. Boxier. Mila pressed hard on the crayon. Then added something else. A triangle shape in the front window. Elena, she whispered. Elena leaned closer. What is it? Mila tapped the triangle. Bird. Elena's breath caught. A symbol. She'd seen it before. On crates at the East Dock. Small. Subtle. A falcon insignia. She didn't say anything. Didn't react dramatically. She simply folded the drawing. And stood. Adrian was halfway down the hallway when she met him. You need to see this, she said. He took the paper. His eyes darkened instantly. Because he recognized that symbol. The falcon. It didn't belong to Viktor Sokolov. It belonged to Konstantin Orlov, a silent partner, a financier, a man Adrian trusted with overseas roots, a man who had access to East Dock shipments, and a man who had visited the ballet recital that night. Adrian's pulse went cold. Not rage, not fury, cold clarity. This wasn't a street war. This was internal erosion. Konstantin had needed Adrian weakened, grieving, distracted, so he could siphon product unnoticed. And when Elena arrived, and Mila began healing, the leverage was disappearing, which meant Escalation was coming. Adrian folded the paper carefully. Elena, he said quietly. Yes. From this moment forward, you don't leave Mila's side. She didn't argue, didn't question, because she saw it in his eyes. The storm wasn't building. It was already here. And this time, it wasn't random men in masks. It was someone who knew the floor plan. Someone who knew schedules. Someone who knew the weak points. Someone who believed Adrian Volkov loved too much now. And could be broken through it. They were about to find out. Exactly how wrong they were. It happened at 6:47 p.m. Routine. Predictable. Exactly how Konstantin would design it. Mila and Elena were in the West Garden. 2 guards posted. Perimeter secure. Or so it seemed. Elena noticed it first. The silence. Birds had stopped. Wind shifted. Then, a faint click. Metal against stone. Elena's head snapped toward the hedge line. Inside, she whispered to Mila. The child didn't hesitate. That alone told Adrian everything later. She trusted Elena completely. The first shot shattered the stone fountain behind them. Sniper. Not random. Calculated. The guards drew weapons instantly. Too late. 2 more shots. Both down. Elena didn't scream. Didn't freeze. She grabbed Mila and rolled behind the garden bench as marble exploded above them. Another shot. Closer. Not a warning. A kill shot. Elena's mind moved fast. Too fast for someone, just a cleaner. She scanned the angles. West wall. High ridge. Limited visibility. Professional. She grabbed a fallen guard's weapon. Mila stared at her. Elena? Look at me, Elena said firmly. Not soft. Not gentle. Focused. Cover your ears. The child obeyed instantly. Elena stood. Exposed herself deliberately for half a second. Shot once. Twice. Then shifted position immediately. Return fire came. Too wide. She had already moved. Adrian burst through the terrace doors at that exact moment. Weapon drawn. Rage burning in his eyes. Until he saw Elena firing. Controlled. Measured. Not panicked. The sniper retreated. Engine revved. A vehicle speeding beyond the outer wall. Adrian didn't chase. He ran to Mila. She was safe. Shaking. But unharmed. Elena, Adrian said sharply. She lowered the weapon. Her hands were steady. Too steady. Where did you learn to shoot like that? He demanded. Elena hesitated. Then answered honestly. After my mother died, I stopped being quiet. The words hung heavy. Adrian studied her differently now. Not as a miracle. Not as fragile. But as someone forged by violence. Just like him. Only she had chosen restraint. He turned toward Dmitri. Locked down everything. Then back to Elena. You knew this was coming. I knew it wouldn't stop at sabotage. Mila tugged at Elena's sleeve. Not trembling. Not silent. Birdman, she whispered. Adrian's eyes darkened. Konstantin Orlov had just crossed the final line. This wasn't leverage anymore. This was war. And this time, Adrian wasn't fighting for territory. He was fighting for his daughter. For the woman who shielded her. And for the version of himself that refused to lose them. The difference? That version was far more dangerous. Konstantin Orlov didn't run. Men like him didn't flee. They calculated exit strategies years in advance. Adrian walked into the private penthouse overlooking the harbor without knocking. Security was already neutralized. Silently, efficiently, Konstantin stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back. I wondered how long it would take you, he said calmly. Adrian didn't respond. He closed the distance slowly. You financed the ballet attack, Adrian said. Incorrect, Konstantin replied. I financed opportunity. Adrian's jaw flexed. You destabilized my house. I exposed your weakness. Konstantin turned. No fear in his eyes. You built your empire on ruthlessness. Then grief made you reckless. And now, love makes you predictable. Adrian stepped closer. You siphoned shipments. Yes. You framed Victor. Yes. You tried to take my daughter twice. Konstantin smiled faintly. She is leverage. Nothing more. That sentence sealed his fate. Adrian didn't lunge. Didn't shout. He simply pulled his weapon. Konstantin's guards burst from the adjacent room. Too slow. 3 shots. Precise. 2 down instantly. The third barely raised his weapon before Dmitri finished him. Silence returned. Constantine didn't move. You won't kill me, he said softly. You're changing. Adrian stepped close enough that the barrel pressed against Constantine's chest. You misunderstood something, Adrian said quietly. Constantine raised a brow. I'm not changing. His voice dropped. I'm prioritizing. A single shot echoed through the penthouse. Constantine collapsed. No spectacle. No rage. Just finality. Adrian holstered his weapon. Clean it, he ordered Dmitri. He walked to the window. Looked down at the city. War was over, but something inside him felt different. Not satisfied. Not triumphant. Resolved. Because this time, he hadn't killed for territory. He had killed to protect something fragile. And that changes a man. When Adrian returned home, Mila was asleep. Elena sat beside her bed. Reading softly. He stood in the doorway for a long time. Watching. She sensed him. Looked up. It's done? She asked quietly. Yes. She nodded once. No questions. No fear. Just understanding. Adrian stepped inside. You're not what you pretend to be, he said. Elena closed the book gently. No, she agreed. Why didn't you tell me about the falcon symbol? Because you needed to see it yourself. And the shooting? I protect what I care about. Silence filled the room. Heavy, but not uncomfortable. Mila stirred slightly. Her small hand reached out in her sleep. Without thinking, both Adrian and Elena reached for it at the same time. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away immediately. Adrian looked at her. Not as staff. Not as a savior. As an equal. You don't belong in the basement, he said quietly. Elena almost smiled. I know. 3 weeks passed without gunfire. For Adrian Volkov, that alone felt unnatural. Shipments stabilized. Constantine's accounts were absorbed quietly. The Falcon insignia vanished from docks and ledgers. War had ended. But something softer had begun. Mila was different now. Not fully healed, but alive again. She laughed in the mornings. She argued about bedtime. She insisted on choosing which blocks fell and when. Control. Elena never pushed. Never demanded. She simply existed beside her. Steady. Grounded. One evening, as the sun dipped gold across the terrace, Mila tugged at Adrian's sleeve. Papa? He knelt immediately. Yes? She glanced toward Elena, who was kneeling by the rose bushes trimming dead petals. Is she staying? Adrian's chest tightened. Yes, he answered. Mila nodded thoughtfully. Forever? The question hit deeper. Adrian looked toward Elena. She wasn't listening. Or maybe she was. I hope so, he replied honestly. That night, after Mila fell asleep, Adrian found Elena on the rooftop terrace overlooking the skyline. She stood with her arms folded, wind moving through her dark hair. You don't sleep much, he said quietly. Neither do you. He stepped beside her. For a while, neither spoke. The city hummed below. You killed him, Elena said eventually. Yes. You don't regret it? No. She nodded once. I don't regret protecting her. Adrian studied her profile. You're not afraid of me. Elena shook her head slightly. I was, she admitted. The first day. And now? Now I know what you fight for. That silenced him. Because very few people understood that distinction. Most only saw what he destroyed. Not what he defended. Elena, he said quietly. She turned toward him. I don't know how to do this. Do what? This. He gestured vaguely between them. Something that isn't control, or leverage, or negotiation. Elena's lips curved faintly. You don't have to control everything. That's how I survived. And how's that working now? He exhaled softly. She stepped closer. Not touching. Just closing distance. You don't buy loyalty, she continued. You earn safety. And you feel safe? He asked. With Mila, she answered. He caught the omission. And with me? She held his gaze this time. Yes. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't breathless. It was solid. Real. And that terrified him more than any war ever had. Because bullets were predictable. This wasn't. Mila's 7th birthday arrived quietly. No politicians. No underworld figures. No press. Just a small gathering in the West Garden. Fairy lights strung between trees. A simple cake. Strawberry, her favorite. Elena had baked it herself. Adrian watched her move between tables, adjusting plates. wiping icing from Mila's fingers when she leaned too close too early. Natural, unscripted, unforced. Dorothy Marquez, now fully recovered and living in the guest wing, sat nearby smiling, a soft blanket over her knees. Dimitri stood guard at a distance, but even he seemed lighter. Mila stood in front of her cake. 7 candles glowing. She looked at her father. Do I say it out loud? Adrian smiled faintly. No, you keep it. She closed her eyes tightly. Small hands clasped. Elena watched her the way she always did. Present, steady. Mila blew out the candles in one breath. Everyone clapped softly. Now tell me, Adrian teased gently. Mila grinned mischievously. No. Then she turned serious. She looked between them, back and forth, carefully. You're both staying, right? The question wasn't childish. It was vulnerable. Adrian's throat tightened. Elena knelt beside Mila. I'm not going anywhere, she said gently. Mila turned to Adrian. And you? Adrian crouched so they were eye level. I already chose, he said quietly. Mila studied him, then nodded once. Satisfied, she leaned toward Elena, wrapped her arms around her neck, and whispered something so soft only Elena heard it. Elena froze. Tears filled her eyes instantly. What did she say? Adrian asked gently. Elena looked at Mila, then back at him. She called me mama. The words settled over the garden like sacred air. Adrian didn't move for a moment. Didn't speak. Because this was the payoff. Not victory. Not dominance. Not control. Family. He stood slowly, walked around the small table, and held out his hand to Elena. Not commanding. Not expecting. Offering. She placed her hand in his. The touch was warm, grounded, nothing explosive, just certain. He leaned forward and kissed her. Soft. Not dramatic. Not performative. The kind of kiss that comes after war. After grief. After survival. Mila clapped. See? I told you. Laughter followed. Light. Real. And in that moment, Adrian Volkov understood something no amount of money had ever taught him. You can buy protection. You can buy loyalty. You can buy silence. But you cannot buy healing. That comes from hands willing to stay. Even when they don't have to. And sometimes, the most powerful man in the city isn't the one with the biggest empire. It's the one brave enough to protect something fragile. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Forbidden Love Cinematic for more stories about power, loyalty, and the kind of love that changes everything. Tell us in the comments, what moment touched you most? And we'll see you in the next story.